Right, Derek. You arrived quite late last night, didn't you? How are you feeling?
I'm all right, yes. We arrived, I arrived about 11 o'clock, actually. We were showing something called the National Emergency Briefing. Have you watched this yet?
No.
Has anyone watched the National Emergency Briefing yet? There's a few hands up. I would really encourage you to do so. It was run in the autumn. It's a UK-wide thing. These incredible experts in climate change, nature, the food crisis, long-term issues, basically the work that I work on, these world-renowned experts talk about the challenges and what we're facing, the tipping points, but they also talk about the solutions. And there's a big campaign to have this shown on the TV so we can all watch it.
Oh, cool.
But in the meantime, community groups and organisations are encouraging people to show the film. So last night, WWF and Climate Cymru showed the film in a cinema in Cardiff, thankfully air-conditioned. And
Look at them.
they got some of the new MSs there, including the Rural Resilience Minister, who responded to the film. And I would urge you all to have a look at it if you can. It's powerful stuff, but it also ends on a positive note in terms of, you know, we can do something about this.
That's awesome.
So that's what it was.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Is this the film that we've got today?
No, that's not that
This
film.
is a different
It should
film.
have been, but there's 50 minutes, that film. So.
Oh, right, okay. But yeah, where can we find it? Where can we see this?
I think you can find it on YouTube, and you can apply to have it shown for free in cinemas and things. So, and if you do want to come, actually, my organisation with Amgueddfa Cymru is having a free showing of it on the 10th of July in St Fagans. So let me know before I go, and I'll make sure you get an invite so that you can come along to that. So it's the morning of the 10th of July, which is a Friday, I think.
Awesome, awesome. And can we circulate that information perhaps to attendees?
That'd be great.
That'd be brilliant.
That'd be great.
Okay, so before we get into our fireside chat, hopefully without the fire, we do have a short film to introduce. So this is a thank you from Amira, your 2050 Cymru. Can we cue the film, please?
My name's Amira, I'm 10 years old. Decades before I was born, Cymru made a promise to me. Roedd yng Nghymru I wedi ei llunio gan y ddewisiadau a oedd wedi cael ei gwneud ymhell cyn I mi fod yma. Because you were bold, the air is clean. Because you took difficult decisions, people have enough to live good lives. Because you thought about what I would need, I can age well. Oherwydd chi, mae Cymru ar rig y byd. Those choices weren't always easy, but everyone played a part in making sure we did the right thing for the sake of future generations.
Cymru has always been a nation of doers, of problem solvers, change makers. We have the ideas, the talent, the resilience to tackle these challenges. Gall Cymru can, ei datrys ar y cyd. Over the past 10 years, we've led the way with our collective vision for a Cymru that's protecting future generations. The Wellbeing of Future Generations Act has helped shape better decisions, protect our environment and support communities. But to get to where we need to be, we have to rebuild trust and unite people around a plan for a better Cymru. We all want a Cymru where every child born into every community has a future full of opportunity. But without action, we are on track for an unrecognisable future, where the choices we have before us today are taken away or made more difficult than we could ever imagine. Climate change is threatening our homes and our coastlines. Inequality is rising, with too many families struggling to make ends meet. Public services are under pressure, misinformation is harming all of us, and trust in our leaders is declining. But Cymru can be different. That's why I'm challenging our political parties, our leaders, our policymakers to learn from the lessons of the past and ensure everyone is on the journey to a better Cymru. Because we can build a stronger, more sustainable well-being economy, where our decisions work for people and planet. We can invest in young people, in green jobs, in healthier communities. We can create a Cymru where Amira and every child can thrive.
Gwnaethwch ddweud Cymru can, ac fe wnaethoch fy mywyd I yn well.
Cymru Can, gadewch i ni adeiladu dyfodol sy'n addys ar gyfer cenedlaethau ein dyfodol.
Oh, da iawn. Everyone clap, it's nice. Oh, diolch yn fawr iawn for that short film, Derek. How do you feel watching yourself on camera?
I hate it.
Do you?
But I'm also grateful that I'm not wearing the same top, because often when I was thinking, like, well, I wouldn't be wearing a jumper today, but I've watched these films and I'm wearing the same shirt on the, on the stage.
Yeah, that's an occupational hazard, definitely.
Yeah.
Before we get into your role and everything, I'm really interested in your personal leadership journey. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got here?
Yeah, well, Lindsay, I hadn't known all of your journey, first of all, and I feel very privileged when I was reflecting on my leadership journey as you were talking about your leadership journey. And I feel very privileged in comparison, but thank you for sharing all of that, because that was, to show that vulnerability is, I think, really important in leaders. I've, started my career, I thought, you've got to be perfect and know everything, and et cetera, and none of us are like that, are they? My leadership journey is one where I never thought I'd have a career in Wales. So I was brought up in Cwmbran in the 70s and 80s. I was growing up gay at that time. Still gay, but I was growing up at that time. You get what I mean? And I just thought, the only way that I can have a happy life at that time was to move to London. That's all I thought I could do. So it didn't matter what course I was going to study, I was going to move to London. And so that's what I did. I went to university in London and started my career there, and worked abroad and so forth. But looking back, what I've been lucky enough to do is go to employment and jobs that I felt a commitment to, a passion to. And most of that has actually been in the third sector.
Yeah.
So I started off in local government in London, working on the devolution of powers to the London Assembly in the area of transport, and then did various bits and pieces, and ended up coming back to Wales. And I was the first employee for Stonewall Cymru, which I'm very proud of, back in the early noughties. And then worked my way through the Trade Union Congress, the big lottery fund as it was called then. And prior to this, my longest job was running a charity. Well, it was not a charity technically, it's a third sector organisation now called Cwmpas. It used to be called the Wales Cooperative Centre. And Nicola Megan's in the room at the back there, former colleague. We support a wellbeing economy, promoting social businesses that are not just looking for profit, but they're looking to have a social and environmental impact as well. So my career has been, blessed in that I've always been able to work in jobs where I felt a commitment to, and I've really had that Sunday evening feeling. Yeah. Worked. I've really had that, and that's worth a lot, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
To have that, and I guess I've been lucky enough to benefit from working with people who've become mentors, maybe not formally, but you've been able to see people and think, that's the kind of leader I'd like to be. Someone who's a bit more empathetic. Or my first boss, he was super strategic. Right. It was none of the crap. He was just focusing on the big picture stuff. And that was really effective. And so I've been able to look at people like that and try, hopefully, to draw on some of their experience and incorporate that into my own, way of, being in the workplace. And I've also been very lucky, actually, and I should say this. I say this, usually when I come here. Academy Wales have been fantastic. I've been to summer school. Isn't it amazing? I've been to winter school. I've had a trip to Brussels paid for by Academy Wales to do something called the Looking Glass exercise. It's a rich resource of development from Academy Wales, and more power to their elbow, because it's really helped me to build my skills throughout the last 30 years or so.
I wish I'd had an Academy Wales when I was starting
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, we're lucky to have them.
I really
yeah.
wish I'd had some of that guidance.
Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, thank you for sharing so much of yourself, because I think it was Brené Brown's work. She's done some really interesting stuff about vulnerability and leadership, and actually you can't have courage without vulnerability.
No.
So if you ever get a chance to watch that TED Talk, it's one that I would recommend. So tell us a bit more about the ACT then and your actual role. What is it that you're shooting for?
What on earth are you doing? Yeah, it's a great job title. So Future Generations Commissioner for Wales, you know, it's the best job in the world. It's the only one like it in the world. We're really blessed to have the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. So in a nutshell, this is Wales having a long-term vision for our country. So we know how difficult and how challenging it is for government, for councils, for health boards to look beyond the next few months, the next few years. But we've got to try, and we've got to try to do that. And the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act requires all of our public sector organisations in Wales, health boards, councils, national parks, fire services, you know, national bodies such as Qualifications Wales and Transport for Wales. We have to put in place long-term plans to deliver on our long-term objective as a country. And, you know, we've got these 7 wellbeing goals which set out our direction, like a third sector organisation or a company. They'd have a vision of where they wanted to go. Countries tend not to have that.
Yeah.
In Wales, we have that long-term direction. We've got these 7 wellbeing goals. And as public sector organisations, requiring third sector involvement as well, but it's the law applies to the public sector. We have to put in place plans that don't just work for today, but they work for our children and our grandchildren. And that's not easy. It's a mindset shift. It's a cultural shift. You're not just doing the right thing until you get another job or until the next election or until the next budget. You're taking the right decisions for people today, but also for our children and our grandchildren. And the decisions that we make, whatever we make, if we make them badly or rightly, will affect future generations. So let's do the right thing. And my job as Future Generations Commissioner is to keep government and public bodies honest. So I give advice, I support them to find the solutions, to do the right thing, but I also hold them to account when they're not taking the right, taking action and thinking about the long term. And I can undertake investigations into particular issues where I think there's a particular problem and make recommendations for action. So it's, frankly, between us all, it's more carrot than it is stick. But I think actually that's largely how you get stuff done. So it's really world-leading, pioneering legislation we have in Wales. We get a lot of interest from other countries about this approach. Hopefully, for all of you, it's making a difference and it's influencing what you do. But for too often, it's a tick box exercise, and that's what we have to move away from.
Yeah, I remember we had a conversation some time ago and you explained it to me as we need to be responsible ancestors.
Yes.
And that really sort of stuck with me, and that's really affected some of the things that we're doing now at WCVA.
Okay.
So we've just, we're in the process of setting up a new fund where we're going to grow Welsh money and take control of Welsh money for Welsh charities so that we can design out some of the nonsense that we have to deal with.
Excellent. Yeah.
So you know when you have a project that's been running brilliantly for years and you've got to call it something else and pretend it's an innovation so you can get the money, like, stop it. How can we grow Welsh money? There's a lot of money that should be in Wales that isn't in Wales, so we're going to try and chase that down.
Yes.
But it was that conversation that inspired, like, how can we fund our own charities come 2050?
Yeah.
And it came from that challenge of being, let's be responsible ancestors.
Oh, great. Oh, well, I'm really pleased to hear that. Yeah. And I think it connects to people in different ways.
Yeah.
I often ask people to think about the youngest person they know. Sometimes this can feel a bit, to the side. But if you ask people to think about the youngest person they know, and they do, it could be a grandkid, it could be a child, it could be the neighbour. I think about my niece. I'm doing the exercise now, by the way. And, and she's 13. And you think, well, clearly, I wanted to have a roof over her head tonight. I want to have a warm meal, good education. But when I'm gone in 50 years' time, I'm passionate about her having a a world in which she can inhabit and have a healthy, happy life. And we have to take those decisions today to make that happen. We can't leave it for others to take those decisions. So yeah, it's very motivating, and I'm very passionate about what I do.
Yeah, not just for people, for hedgehogs too.
For hedgehogs too.
For hedgehogs too.
Yes,
let's
right.
not forget the hedgehogs.
Yeah.
So we're 10 years in.
We're
We're 10 years into the Act. I think we've come a long way. I think people are proud of it. I think the rest of the world are jealous of it. I think a lot of people are looking to Wales to say, oh, wow, shall we do something like that? There's still a long way to go, though, isn't there?
Absolutely. There's a long way to go, but you can point to some things that have happened over the last 10, 11 years that wouldn't have happened without the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And believe me, I've done the work to look at those decisions, to understand, its influence. There are other factors, always other factors, but if you look at our shift to a more sustainable transport system, it's not there yet. If any, travelled in public transport yesterday, I did yesterday, 2 trains cancelled. It's not perfect, but we've had a big shift in our funding for public transport compared to roads in the last 10 years or so, or, less than that. And so we're getting brand new trains. We're seeing more people using public transport. That's a key, step that we need to take to a more sustainable country for the long term.
Yeah.
The road around Newport, the controversial M4 Relief Road, Mark Drakeford, as First Minister, said the reason he didn't go ahead with that decision, the main reason, because it didn't comply with the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. So you see it all over the place. I was at a charity the other day. They said we wouldn't be here. We're a recycling charity. We wouldn't be here without that legislation. We see changes to the curriculum around eco-literacy, around creating better citizens, inspired by the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. Second in the world in terms of recycling, inspired by the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. So some really good stuff. Actually, the recycling stuff is really interesting because the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act is not just about the long term, it's about joining things up, moving behind the silos. So when you look at the waste strategy for Welsh Government, it isn't just about recycling and reuse and repair, which is important, but it's how can we create more cohesive communities?
Yeah.
How can we support the language at the same time? And that comes through the strategy. You wouldn't see that in other countries potentially, and as a result, the third sector are a crucial component of delivering on that scheme. But having said all that, that's the good stuff. If you look at things like nature, we're the fifth, one in five, let me get this right, 1/5 of our species are at risk of extinction.
Wow.
We're one of the most nature-depleted countries on the planet. And we often see nature is not a priority within the public sector. It's not given the attention that decarbonisation is. We've got some big steps to take in terms of decarbonisation. So we've done a lot in terms of reaching our net zero targets 2040, but we've got loads more to do. And if you look at our health system, well, the Act is telling us to focus on prevention, dealing with those long-term health trends, where we've got big problems with type 2 diabetes, we've got big problems with obesity, we've got big problems with many illnesses that we could be preventing. We've done some analysis, we've not published it yet, looking at budgets, and something like 1-2% of public sector budgets have a preventative impact. Well, it's no wonder we're getting if we're not dealing with the root causes, we're just dealing with the consequences, and we're just in this spiral. So we've got to find a way of unpicking that. So massive, big challenges. I'm not underestimating them, but Cymru Can is all about having this positive vision of what we have achieved and what we can do to get further and faster.
Oh, diolch, Derek. And I've observed as well that actually there's loads of money allocated to prevention, but it all gets pinched once we have an acute health crisis.
Yeah.
And I think that's the shift that I'm going to be calling to government for.
Yeah.
That if we're serious about prevention, then we need to put our money where our mouth is.
Exactly. Yeah. And there is a lot in the Plaid Cymru manifesto around prevention. And so, I'm hoping that will mean a significant shift. We have a new minister with responsibility for health promotion, public health. So, there's some really positive signs, but that needs to be translated into delivery, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm really, really keen to see that too. So, how can people support the Act? So it can be really lonely, sort of pushing this sort of change. We're looking at national behaviour change to achieve the goals that you want. Like, how can we get behind you? Like, what do you need from people?
Well, that's right. This is cultural change as much as anything. And I think the thing I would ask people to focus on, really, is the 5 ways of working in the legislation. These are not things I've made up. They are there because these are the behaviours that public sector, that if we deliver on these behaviours, the outcomes start to happen. If we practice these ways of working, then the change starts to happen.
Yeah.
And so that's how we can effectively tell whether a public body is delivering on the legislation or not, if I can see that those 5 ways of working are being applied. So let me go through them briefly. First one is about thinking and acting for the long term. So, you might not be able to put a budget in place for 3 years, for 10 years. You can put a budget in place hopefully for 3 years often not actually. But you can have a plan and a vision for where you want to get to in 10 to 15 years' time.
Yeah.
I was at the National Library recently. They've decarbonised their buildings. They put something like 1,600 solar panels on the National Library in Aberystwyth. They didn't have the money in place. They didn't have the commitment from government to fund all of that. But they had a direction, a sense of where they were going. And bit by bit, year on year, they've been able to have this fantastic award-winning decarbonisation project. So long term is one, prevention is another. What are we doing to prevent things from happening, not just dealing with the consequences? Integration is another way of working. So through the public service boards, through the work that you do, join up. It's, just because you're working in health doesn't mean you don't have a responsibility around climate and nature. You do. And just because you're working in climate and nature doesn't mean you don't have a responsibility around health. We've all got to work together on our collective agendas to make that money go further and to have that impact. We know how, money on arts and culture, for example, has a massive benefit for people's well-being and their health. So, it's all connected. So integration is key. Collaboration, so partnership working, connects to integration. So we expect to see collaboration. It's not nice to do. It's a must, between public bodies and crucially with the third sector and the private sector. And then the 5th one is around involvement. Now, this is the area perhaps where we're the weakest. We have a commitment to involve people in decision-making and the design of programmes in Wales that doesn't exist anywhere in the UK. This is meant to be around proper, meaningful involvement, co-production, asking people, for their ideas, what's mattering to them, what are the solutions that they have, and then involving them in the implementation. We can see a rising level of disconnect with government, with public bodies, distrust in the things that governments and public sector organisations are trying to do. So we've got to reconnect, and how we reconnect is by talking to people, involving them in those decisions, and often they have the right solutions and the right decisions. If you look at carbon, nature and action on climate change, we're seeing increasing pushback, aren't we, in some of these areas? Yeah. People rightly concerned about some of the action that's being taken. But, if you work with people and understand those concerns, we can work through them. We can take the necessary action, but don't do to people, do with.
Yes.
Alongside, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I can see in the side of my eye here that we're getting some Slidos.
Oh dear.
Shall we see what's coming through on the Slido? How will the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act put environment first, requiring society not to get what it wants, e.g. use less water as society needs environment to survive?
How will it do that?
Yeah.
That's crucial to what it's about. So we have 50 measures of success, national indicators, a national scorecard effectively for how well we're doing. So we have a way of measuring how we clean up our waters and rivers, how we decarbonise, how we restore nature, and the legislation requires all of our public sector organisations to put in place plans to show how they're doing exactly that.
Yeah.
Now, often, you will see, that happening through the well-being objectives that public bodies are putting in place to deliver on the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. Putting the objectives in place, of course, is the easy bit. That's got to then lead to implementation. But that is exactly what the Act is about. But it's not just, it's often seen as just about the environment, but it's not just about the environment. That's at the heart of this. But this is about safeguarding our culture and our art and our language for future generations. This is about the health of our nation, as I was talking about. This is about creating an economy that is strong for the long term. It's not all about if we're getting this right, we are looking across our border to England, to Scotland, to France, and saying, right, we looked long term. Thank goodness we avoided that issue there, because we saw it coming and we did something early on. And also, thank goodness we were looking long term, because we spotted that opportunity around energy or AI or something, and as a result, our economy is stronger because we saw it coming, and we were ready for it. That's how it's meant to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we create a Wales where charities and third sector organisations can look long term and plan long term, I will die a happy camper.
Good.
Is it fair to say then, Derek, that we are in the business of happiness here? It's not just the environment.
Well-being we call it, but happiness, I like that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the minister who put this legislation in place, or started it off, Jane Davidson, many of you will know, she left the Senate many years ago. She called it an antidote to hate.
Wow, that's powerful. We need
It's
one of those
powerful,
right
isn't
now.
it? Yeah, so it's about well-being, but for all of us, not just for the wealthy. And it's about doing that, recognising what matters to people. So, GDP is not what makes people happy. We need basic wealth and living standards. Of course we do. I'm not denying that. But we also need, to have a good, happy life, you need clean air, don't you?
Yeah.
You need to be able to get around and be able to afford to do that. You need access to a good health system. You need to be able to use your language to access services. And you need to be able to see some of the wonderful arts and heritage that we've got. So it's seeing the whole picture, not just working in those silos.
And together it's so precious. So precious.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Let's see what else has come through on our Slidos. Recycling is great, but without society using products using recycled materials, the circle is not complete. How is the well-being of future generations challenging society to change to do this?
Yes, well, that's right. Recycling is at the top end of the waste hierarchy. We've got to, repair, reuse, and consume less, frankly, and that is a challenging message to get across, isn't it? We've also that is my job, and that's part of the challenge that I make to public sector organisations. That let's pat ourselves back on what we have achieved, but let's move through those levels so that we're not creating the recycling in the first place. So we are seeing some of that. Welsh Government is about to introduce a return scheme.
Yeah.
Maybe bottles be included, but a return scheme so you get a deposit. You used to have this when I was growing up.
Yeah.
Your Corona bottle, you'd get 10p or something, collect them, wouldn't you? Those of you who are old enough to remember. And so we're going back to those days. The Act is telling people that we've got to go, take all of these actions and go further down that, hierarchy of actions.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. I think what people really want to know, though, is did you ever steal your neighbour's recycling bottles so that you could get money for sweets?
Well, I was brought up on a farm, so it was a bit difficult.
Just me then.
But yeah, it was a bit difficult to do that because it was a long way to go.
Yeah, that was our scam. That was our scam growing up. So
I'm sure many of us did that. Yeah.
Okay, prevention is often scuppered by short-term budget regimes. Can we shift to a funding system that creates the conditions for us to design services well? That's a good question.
That's a great question. Well, I think I've given up on thinking that we can, the answer to this is long-term budgets, because I think, in many areas, it's going to be very difficult to get to a position where we have long-term budgets. It's not impossible. I mean, I think there's a commitment to Cardiff Airport for 10 years. So if we can do it for Cardiff Airport, we can do it in other areas, can't we? But you know, that is, so we can do a better job, and I'm always calling for that. And if we should be doing that now. If we can't do that at the start of a Senedd term, commit to 3-year budgets, then we will never do. But 3-year budgets are not that long, are they? So I think we absolutely should be calling for better long-term funding for projects, keeping to things that are working rather than constantly moving budgets around. But let's not use this as an excuse, because we'll never, if we wait until we get to a point where the Treasury or the Welsh Government's financial department decides that we can all have long-term budgets and then we'll look at prevention, then, you know, it'll be too late. So we've got to work within the current system and do the types of things that the National Library is doing, and recognising that we haven't got certainty around our budget, but we do know where we're going, and we are going to you know, put money aside and increasingly focus on that. The approach that I've been taking in terms of prevention is to try a different track. You know, you can talk until you're blue in the face about the need for prevention, but, you know, things are not shifting. So we thought we'd work with some other important people in the public sector. So I often speak to chief executives or leaders or sustainable development leads, but we're now speaking to the finance directors.
Nice.
And we're saying, you know, tell me about your budget, tell me to what extent it's having a preventative impact. And so we've gone through about 6 or 7 public sector bodies looking at their budgets. This is where we're getting these figures around 1%, 2%, 3% of the funding is actually preventative. But what I'm seeing is light bulbs go on.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have the solutions for a health board compared to a local authority. That's not where I'm working. But they do. And they're saying, well, actually, we're spending all this budget. One of them said to us, we're spending all this budget on something. We could easily be having the same impact and having a preventative impact at the same time.
Yeah.
So we're going to shift what we spend it on. Having that mindset shift. Others, the local authority said to us, right, we're going to have targets now, internal targets, to increase our preventative spend year on year. We can't change it overnight, but incrementally we can change it. So hopefully getting the finance directors on board, which is actually where the real power lies, isn't it, in the public sector, is starting hopefully to make a bit of a change. But there's not one solution. There's different approaches to this, and others do it in different and interesting ways. But we've got to have that. That's why the 5 ways of working are important, because having that as part of how you take decisions can lead to better decisions, I think.
And I think some of those answers that we're looking for are in this room now. So I'm quite excited to see how the next section of the day is going to run. We're going to put you in a fishbowl, Derek.
Me too, yes.
So can I invite you to join us at the fishbowl table in the centre?
Thank you. So, please don't leave me stranded up here. So we talk about the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. Hopefully I've helped to explain it in that session just now about, you know, where we need to be going, what the direction is, you know, where it's setting us to go. What I'm interested to know is how is it influencing your work or not, and what more can we do to support you with its implementation in your organisation? So quite broad questions. Please come up. Sit down. We've got 3 chairs, so we've got plenty of space up here, and let me know your thoughts, and then we'll see where we get to. Thank you, Robin. Thank you. Oh, brilliant. Great. So, Robin, you were seated first, I think, so you go.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you. It's great to hear and see the videos, so thank you for all the work you've been doing. I think I work for Denbighshire County Council, and it's something that's really at the heart of our corporate plan. But one of the recent activities that we've done is using the dreaded AI, which I know there's mixed feelings about, but we used AI to take the definition of prevention and the 4 levels of prevention, and then run an analysis using those definitions against the annual plans for each of our services. And having done that, it then produced an analysis saying what proportion of the activities planned for this year are taking each of the 4 levels of prevention. And so we can see some are really doing a lot, and others maybe could do more to drive down the demand. So the analysis, we then ran it against our corporate risk register and our community risk register to then see what each service could do more to take more of a preventative lens. We know it's a new area, so we didn't share that widely. We shared that with each head of service for their own development, and now we're working with the heads of service and the corporate directors to see what can be done over, to develop the areas that need more work and try and drive down demand and pressure on increasing on services under increasing pressures. So I really appreciate that prompt. So thanks.
Amazing, thank you. So it's not my job to respond to each point. You follow on and carry on the conversation.
Hello, I'm Bex. I'm a GP in Petolba, and I'm representing the 50,000 patients that live in the Avon cluster. We've got big problems with health inequality, social deprivation, and as the cluster GMS representative, I've been saying for a long time, I think we need to improve people's lives and the desire that they have to look after themselves, and that they've got a lot of skills already. They've got really strong communities and really good arts, and we need to tap into those things and the natural resources that we have in order for people to want to be bothered to look after their health. It's just not massively on their agenda at the moment. So when I go to meetings, people say, but that's not health, and you can't use health's money to try to make people have hot homes And I said, well, they're not going to survive the winter if they don't have heating or their basic needs met. So it is health. And what I would find really, really helpful, because I think what you said today has really resonated, and I shall be quoting your ACT, Left, Right and Centre, and you and everything you've heard. Because although I've read this paper when I applied for a job in health inequalities, it means more to me now I've heard it spoken about live and seen. I would love there to be shared budgets so that we can say, right, we've got an arts and health thing here that we both have to agree to share the money, and it's no longer like, oh, it's your money, it's my money, it's not my remit, it's not your remit. But I know, like in the arts, they're doing things for health, and I think in health we should be doing things for the arts.
It's a nice follow-on, isn't it? When you finish, sorry, you have to get up and go back to your seat so other people can sit down. Sorry to be rude.
I knew I'd forget something, and that was the point I forgot. So, and also you can't return in this round. But you can come back in the next round as well. So whenever a seat becomes vacant, fill it.
Just fill it, don't ask, just come up, yeah.
Eluned ydw i, dwi'n rhedeg celfyddydau rhyngwladol Cymru, dwi'n abod Derek ar gwaith yn dda iawn. Ni di asiantaeth rhyngwladol Cyngor Celfyddydau Cymru, a da ni'n gweithio yn agos iawn efo Deddf Llesiant Cenedlaethau'r Dyfodol. A dweud y gwir, da ni di llunio, nathon ni lunio y gwelliant i'r bil yn y lle cyntaf i wneud nod diwylliant, a yn falch iawn bo iaith yn rhan o'n efo hefyd. Ond da ni hefyd wedi gweld y fantais o weithio'n rhyngwladol i ddod â syniadau fewn, i fod yn gwneud y gwelliant yn y lle cyntaf, ond hefyd i rannu efo'r byd y pwysigrwydd o gelfyddyd a diwylliant i bob sector. A fel oedd Bex yn dweud rwan, mae gennym ni gynllun celf a iechyd hynod bwysig sydd yn gwneud gwahaniaeth. Felly, ond, o fewn y celfyddydau, da ni y trydydd isa yn Ewrop ar gwariant yr celfyddydau, ond mae'r mantais sydd yn dod i'r sectorau eraill i gyd mor ddefn. Dwi'n di sefyll fama heddiw yma, neu eistedd fama heddiw yma, oherwydd bod fi eisiau just agor llygad bob sector cyhoeddus yng Nghymru. Os da chi am newid diwylliant, mae rhaid chi gario diwylliant efo chi. Dydy o ddim yn digwydd ar ei ben ei hun. A mae artistiaid yn creu gwahaniaeth ac yn creu dyfodol ac yn galluogi chi be bynnag ydych maes chi feddwl yn wahanol. A mae hwn yn cael ei weld yn y maes iechyd yn arbennig. Felly, yr cwestiwn sgen i ydy, be all Derek wneud mwyn agor meddylia bob sector yng Nghymru i sut da ni'n gweithio yn well. Chydig fel da ni wedi dechrau, a megis dechrau da ni mewn celfa iechyd, a gyda llaw da ni'n arwain y gad ar hyd Brydain yn hyn ac yn rhyngwladol, mae pobl yn sbio i Gymru ar beth sy'n ymlaen mewn celfa iechyd, ond dim ond dechrau da ni, ond sut da ni'n cael hynny i weithio ar draws y sectorau yn fwy effeithiol, a beth da ni angen wneud yn Cyngor Celfyddydau ac aniatáu hynna hefyd.
Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. I feel like I should answer that question because it was directed at me. I mean, it's a great question. One of the things I mentioned, we're reviewing the legislation to see how we can make it stronger. And there's no enforcement at the moment. But actually, I think one of the best ways in which we see action and the things that I focus on is, you know, getting people together, the convening, you know, people across sector to find solutions, and then promoting those solutions, because I can see when we show that this is going on in this health board or this is going on over there in this council, that can be really influential in encouraging people. The other bit of my role I think is important is, you know, some of this is controversial. Some of this councillors, board members won't be supportive. I am there to be your ally within those organisations to give you, you know, the legislation really, but through my role, to give you the green light, the encouragement, the support to promote these actions. You can explain internally, this is in line with the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, and my office can then give the backing to that. So we've had councils, for example, introduce or think about introducing things that they thought their population could be, you know, find quite difficult. But giving some external support to some of those brave decisions, hopefully that's helped with the implementation. So, you know, that's just a partial response to Lynyd, but I'm always interested in what more my office can do. We're quite a small team, but we're completely independent of the public sector. So we've got no skin in the game in terms of delivery. So that enables us to speak truth to power and say those things that those of us who are perhaps responsible for delivery or, you know, should have been doing better perhaps, might be unwilling to say. Who was the first to sit down?
It's on already, is
yes,
it? Yeah. Yes. Morning, Burda. My name's Rebecca. I work for Wrexham County Council, so up in the north of Wales. I am head of service law there, so legal democratic registration. And as head of democratic services, I'm also in charge of scrutiny. So I just want to say I think this act is an incredible piece of legislation. I was a human rights lawyer around the world, as I've already mentioned to a number of people, but I came back to Wales where I was born. I was born in Wrexham, in part because I think this legislation is so incredible. Awesome. And I really care about governance for the people of Wrexham, which is where my community is from. Mining town, no money, no resources. We all know what it's like. But we have got a good football team.
Never gets mentioned, though.
Never gets mentioned. It's the only thing we've got. Yeah. The Act, you said, talk about the Act. How is it influencing the work? I'm 4 months in the job. Right. I'm already being a pain in the arse, I think. But I'm in charge of scrutiny, speaking truth to power. I love it. So I started scrutiny sessions by going through, basically asking questions in line with the Act, and I annoyed all the officers in the local authority. So I'm really keen to hear from anyone that can help me with this. So I'm now trying to restructure officer reports around the Act, hoping that actually things like involvement, equality, basic things that I thought everyone would be looking at. I don't want to diss Wrexham, but I think local authorities have got problems embodying this. I think it has become a tick box exercise, and I was talking to some people within the local authorities saying there was a big push to begin with the quality assessments and then integrated impact assessments, and it has become tick box, and I want to try and work out how to go back to officers so they understand why in scrutiny maybe the elected members are asking the questions they are, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I think even asking what involvement have you done? It's like, oh, Rebecca asked that question, didn't she? There's a reason why. So I don't know. 4 months in, I haven't looked at all the support you do provide already, but any support from anyone in the room, seriously, or from yourself on how to get energized back around and not just being an annoying lawyer. It's actually quite important.
No, isn't that amazing that you've come back to Wales inspired by the legislation?
Yeah.
And do you know what? That's not the first time I've heard that. I've probably, heard that 10 times in the last couple of years. So wonderful. Let's be proud of something that we've got that's bringing people to Wales or back to Wales. We do have a scrutiny framework that does the job I think you're already doing, which tells or advises councillors, and we've just circulated it to the new Senedd members, about the questions that we expect them to be asking in committees when decisions are made around committee reports. If it's not there, these are the questions you should be asking. So have a look at our scrutiny framework. Someone on here has also talked about printing do you print league tables for how public bodies are performing against the well-being goals? We don't do that. It is a challenging thing to be able to do that because people they measure their own objectives in different ways. But there is maybe a case of calling out inaction after 10 or 11 years where we're not seeing it in a way that we haven't done previously. But up until now, it's been about supporting, encouraging, motivating, and it is making change happen. But in some places, it's not, and time has run out. It's no longer an excuse.
Good afternoon, Derek and Lindsay. Thank you for your speech and stories. Always inspirational to listen to you. My name is Anirban. I'm the project manager of a community organization called Kiran Kamri. And we empower people who are marginalized, who are ignored, who are unseen, who are often forgotten. And my role is not to speak of them or about them or for them. My role is to empower them so that they can speak for themselves. So we, as an organization, we do not believe like speaking for somebody. We believe in empowering somebody so they can stand up and speak. This room is full of very strong and influential people, those who are the public servants. And the word public servant starts with the word public. So every decision is made by any public servant in some way. It is affecting the common people. They are maybe directly, maybe indirectly, but the common people are always the beneficiaries of every decision of the public servant. And unfortunately, not always the decisions are made. Not always, and I qualify my statement. The decisions are not always made in the best interest of public. There can be n number of reasons. There can be no bias or no malice on making a decision which is not suitable for the common public. So rather than always depending on somebody making a decision for my benefit, my humble question to you that what we can do to empower the public so they are aware of their own rights and they can question when the decisions are not made. Elected representatives are accounting to the public at national level, at the regional level, at council levels. Public Servants Act says that they are also, they need to treat public with dignity and they are accountable to the public. But public often do not know what they can do when their rights are being ignored, when their voices are not being heard. So, for example, I'm giving you two live examples. We did a survey in Cardiff city centre where we're asking people about what do you know about global warming and carbon cycle? What is greenhouse gas? Greenhouse gas is something which is rising the temperature. But what is carbon cycle? How you can lock the greenhouse gas in the carbon cycle? What happens when the carbon cycle is released? We ask people like you are wearing a pair of jeans and how many jeans you bought in last 10 years. He said the 10 pair of jeans I bought last 10 years. I said how many liters of water one pair of jeans consumed, do you know? And they said, take a guess, 10 liter, 12 liter,
I'm really
20
sorry,
liter.
your time's up.
So the question is that what can you be doing to give us the knowledge and understanding so we can stand up and ask questions for ourselves rather than public service is always good, but I want to your question to how can we empower ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll come back to that in a minute if I can, because maybe the people here have an answer to some of that. But I'll definitely come back to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
My name's Gemma. I work at Cardiff Met University as Associate Dean for Student Engagement. So my question's kind of related to future students, I suppose. We had some data this week that applications from Welsh domicile students have dropped again this year.
Right.
And in the home nations, we have the lowest rates of students wanting to remain in Wales to go to university. Most of them will be choosing to go to England over Wales. So those two things combined are quite concerning for kind of future aspiration, I think. And whilst I think the role of universities is evolving and changing and probably needs to do so, England have brought in the lifelong learning entitlement, which changes perhaps a lot of ways that people can access funding for future learning, which I hope will replicate something similar in Wales. But it strikes me that this is something that could fall under that preventative layer as well. And how can we work together, I suppose, to kind of work on that disillusion, that perhaps lack of inspiration that we might be seeing in some parts of Wales to want to do more than the previous generation and to kind of use education as a vehicle to broaden their horizons. So I think there's a lot of people in this room, perhaps in different roles, that we could be working with as universities, perhaps not just thinking about the next few recruitment cycles, but what do we want to be by 2050 and what kind of public are we serving?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had all the answers to some of those questions, but I think one of the powers of this legislation is to look at future trends. There'll be a future trends report coming out later this year. It comes out 1 year after each Senedd election. It should be influencing all of what you do. It's telling us what the future looks like. If you start to, put those trends forward, it's catastrophic for Wales, isn't it? In terms of education and young people leaving Wales and the skills that we need. And, my job will be to sort of highlight, not what's just happening now, but what this means for 10, 15, 20 years for our economy and for our country and for our public services. And then others will have good ideas on the action that we need to take. But it's frightening, isn't it? Yeah. That's happening. Just in terms of the other question that I was asked about awareness, one of the things that put together this legislation was something called the Wales We Want conversation. I don't know if anyone was involved in the Wales We Want conversation. Looks like no one was. So it was 2013, 2014. The UN was having the World We Want conversation about the Sustainable Development Goals, and in Wales we had the Wales We Want conversation, and that was an attempt to involve people in shaping this legislation in a way that we haven't done before or since. And I was going to say, what I see is that was really important, because people who were involved in that, they're talking often in their health board or their council or the national park to say, this is the promise we made to future generations, and it's not being delivered. So that point you were making about raising awareness and ensuring everyone, we're not going to make the progress we need if it's just me shouting about it. Everyone needs to be empowered to demand services are made and changed in a sustainable way in the interests of future generations. And I think we're due another one of those conversations, and those national conversations, and I'm hoping this Welsh Government will do that.
Princess.
Yeah, hi.
Hi,
Derek. Thank you for making the trip from Cardiff. I actually missed out on the emergency national screening. I was supposed to be one of the panelists, but I couldn't be in two places at the same time, so good to have you here. In terms of so first of all, my name is Princess Onyangusi. I am the founder and community director for Safe Online Space Cymru, which is a social enterprise focused on promoting an inclusive, healthy digital community in Wales. So in terms of how the FGC Act supports what we do, or how we support what the FGC Act is all about, we are very keen on a healthy community in Wales, which is promoting a healthier Wales, and we improve the resilience of Wales by ensuring that online bullying, online grooming, negative traits online are dealt with. We also recently held what we call the Digital Pathways to Net Zero, which ties in with the sustainability goals of Wales. I'm particularly concerned about the recent law or proposed ban on the under-16s on social media access. Now, this proposed ban was put in place on the 15th of June this year. And from what I gather, it is not a completely devolved rule. So we all know what that means. It means we have to feed off whatever the UK government wants from that. So in line with that, I'm just asking the FGC, what are your plans? Where do you stand with regards to that proposed ban? And how do you intend to support Safe Online Space Cymru to achieve the intended goals of that proposed ban? Bearing in mind some of the things that I would suggest could be done will be the FGC, being that you can't decisively put up a rule or impose your recommendations on the Welsh Government. One of the recommendations will be that you call like a meeting of the Children's Commissioner of Wales, yourself, the Older People's Commissioner, and some other stakeholders that can sit down, articulate how this can be done and how this can make sure that we align with this proposed ban. One of the things to bear in mind is, because I've had to have sessions with people on the pros and the cons of this proposed ban, and one of the things that comes to mind is the fact that for the pros, it is a good law in terms of its intentions. But what we have to also consider is how would it be delivered? How do we actually ensure that what we have in mind or what the intentions are actually delivered efficiently? The cons are, it might be a backdoor of kind of insisting on digital IDs for people. Because I did say in one of the sessions we had, how you could go online direct and someone would say you need to prove that you're not under 16. If I'm looking at you, I can tell you're above 16 years old.
Yes.
But online,
1 or 2 years.
but online, how do we ensure or how do we make sure that it's not an indirect way of getting people to then prove themselves, just like we currently have proof you're not a robot. This could now be proved you're not under 16. That could be a new thing that will come on board. So how do you intend to show where you stand and also put that into action? That's my question.
I was about to stop you there, so thank you.
Can we take a few comments and questions at the same time, so there's not just me talking? Yeah, thank you. Thank you,
So
Princess.
somebody may have some ideas in the room with regards to that, so hopefully there'll be a contribution.
I'm John Clark. I'm an ecologist and a programme manager for Cyfoeth Naturiol Cymru, Natural Resources Wales. Derek, thank you so much for your presentation. It is groundbreaking legislation, so we're just over 10 years since the Wellbeing Future Generations Act. It's also now, this year, 10 years since the sister act, so the Wales Environment Act as well, Environment Act Wales 2016. That, for our organisation, set us a duty, Natural Resources Wales, to publish the State of Natural Resources report. That was published last year. We talked yesterday about experts being important within leadership. I'd also say evidence is important within leadership. So this is also just, I'm encouraging everyone in the room to just be aware of that report, and through public service boards and other mechanisms through NRW to connect with us in terms of that evidence for the state of environment. So I guess if it's a question, it's just ensuring people are signposted to us and really how you, as a within your role, can best support NRW in terms of providing that environmental evidence and that guidance to really inform sustainable long-term solutions in the various plans and policies that we have to deliver in the public sector. So,
Diolch, thank you very much for that.
Diolch. Helo, enw i di Fflir a dwi'n gweithio'n Archwilio Cymru. Dwi'n gwybod bod ein swyddfeydd ni'n yn gweithio'n agos iawn fel y mae i. Da ni'n gweithio'n galed i drio aplaio y ddeddf i'n gwaith ni ffordd da ni'n archwilio perfformiad ar draws y sector gyhoeddus yng Nghymru. Ond un o'r rei dwi'n ffeindio fwyaf anodd i edrych ar yn benodol ydy prevention. A mae yna alw amdano fo gan lot o'r cyrff da ni'n archwilio i ni edrych yn gynyddol ar prevention. Ond yr her dwi'n deimlo yn amlwg yn aml iawn wrth fynd ati ydy y diffyg data. Pan da chi'n edrych ar prevention yn aml iawn mae'r outcomes da chi'n gobeithio fydd yn dod o'r gwaith yna, maen nhw'n croesi ar draws sefydliadau. Yn aml iawn, dyn nhw'n just eistedd efo un. A mae'r y problemau sydd gen cyrff yn rhannu data mwyn gallu gwneud y gwaith yn amlwg a be mae o'n gwblhau, be mae o'n achievio yn anodd iawn. Felly dwi'n ffeindio mae'n un o'r heriau mwyaf i ni gael mewn i'r maes yna bod o'n mor bwysig. Felly o'n i yn mynd i ofyn am yr dashboard nes di gyfeirio atio gynt ynglyn â data. Os ydy hwnna'n rhywbeth da chi yn yr swyddfa wedi ffeindio unrhyw atebion ni, neu os ydy'n rhywbeth da chi'n cydnabod a di rhoi yn nhw feddwl tŵl sut i fynd o amgylch yna. Chos yn amlwg, atebolrwydd ydy'r prif ffordd o greu pwysau mwyn newid diwylliant a newid gweithgareddau. A dwi'n meddwl heb greu sefyllfa lle mae atebolrwydd yn cael ei rannu ymysg sefydliadau, mae'n anodd iawn i gael y cyllid i lifo yn y ffordd cywir ar gyfer yr dibenion da ni'n gobeithio creu. Diolch fawr.
Diolch, thank you.
Shall I come back on a few questions very quickly?
Yeah, what I was going to say is if we just take the last two people's comments and questions,
and
then we can wrap up. And you can make comments on a few of the different things that have recently been discussed.
There we are.
Diolch, thank you.
Ruth Johnston, Natural Resources Wales. I'm just going to respond to the previous person. Data is a big challenge, which my colleague John talked about evidence, and it's really important. Welsh Government did a piece of work called the Freshwater Gateway, where it looked at how to bring together not only public sector evidence, but also third-party citizen science data about the environment. But it's got stalled in Welsh Government, so Derek, if you could pick that one up and prod them, that would be great. So you talked about the surveys about Wales we want. Where I sit in NRW, I often feel that society is divorced from the reality of the impacts it has on the environment in particular. So you also talked about what society and public can demand from our services and what we need to do. I feel that the next conversation should be a reality check about the Wales you create by what you do, and what us as the public sector should be demanding of society in terms of making them change to help us deliver our jobs and also to deliver the aspirations of this Act.
Thank you very much. I'll be writing that one down as the quote of the day in terms of the Wales you create by what you do. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Pranjal. I'm a researcher from Swansea University. I'm basically interested in the Future Generation Act and the particular focus on the electronics devices. There has been a policy passed by the Senate that how should the small electrical devices should be recycled, how they should be dumped. So from the repair and recycling perspective, what is the Commissioner, Derek, are the different initiatives? There's a big initiative of Repair Cafe Wales, and in that particular angle, what is the future of Repair Cafe? As of right now, my understanding in Wales, they are funded by Welsh Government, but if we have to make this a cultural change, then what is the sustainability perspective? Mostly these repair cafes are funded by Repair Cafe Wales. The money comes from Welsh Government, but how can we develop a business model around it and then develop an understanding that people need to think about the broken devices. We are living in a fast consumerism world where we love to discard and get new one because it is easy. So what is the work done till now? I believe there are many research as well done on this perspective. So is there a plan on this? And lastly, would love to understand from the design perspective is how can we bring different recycling partners, industries, researchers, third sector, how this repair and recycling should look like. The policy has been designed, so I was part of that small focus group which we did in Swansea, where we brought recycling partners. So there is one angle of what policy is saying, is there is one angle of what partners can really do. So has there been any work on that scale, that what can actually be done by the people on the ground and what does the policy say? Thank you.
Diolch, thank you. I've actually used Benfig to borrow some things as well. So, and repair a TV.
Yeah, me too, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I mean, I guess I start by saying thank you for the engagement in that fishbowl exercise and those questions and those comments. I found that incredibly useful and interesting. You can see, and I'll do my best at trying to answer some of those points that have been raised. Everything is in scope of the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, and so which is good and bad. Everyone sees their particular issue, their subject as being relevant, which is what it's about. This is about the future direction of the country. But it also means this framework is general. It's not presenting solutions to everything. It's providing a framework for people to find solutions to everything, if you see what I mean. So some of these areas, my office is a small team, we don't get specifically involved in because we can't get involved in everything. We focus on particular areas. So in that light, one of the calls that I've made is for Repair Cafe Wales to be in every community in the country and the borrowing scheme Benthyg too, because I think that is how we move up this hierarchy of waste. And we're yet to see what the commitment of this government will be to those schemes, but I'll be certainly pushing hard to see those rolled out right across the country. I'll go back to your point, Princess. That's really a responsibility for the Children's Commissioner. I'm not dodging that, but we try to. People are sucking their teeth. We try not to step on each other's toes because we've got enough to do. So the Children's Commissioner is taking a particular lead in that area. So I haven't actually come out with a position on the social media ban, but my perspective will be the one that we have been talking about, which is not just understanding what this now means for children and their well-being today, but what this could mean for their well-being long term. Could it could affect their connections and their potential increased isolation if we don't improve the spaces, the physical spaces that they can be part of. Does this lead them to be more isolated, or can it have a better long-term mental health effect? So that's where I'll come in, but it's a lead for the Children's Commissioner. Audit Wales, I'm so glad you came up because I forgot to mention it crucially. The Audit Office has an audit function in relation to this. Not many audit offices do that. They look at the finances and the value for money. Our Audit Office goes into every public body once a cycle, once every Senedd term at least, to see how you're implementing the 5 ways of working. That's how they see whether you're doing a good job or not. We don't call out public bodies at the moment if they're not doing a good job, but maybe that is something I could look at based on some of the questions that are coming in. It's more about giving them advice on how they can do better next time in previous cycles. But it's an important role in our approach in Wales, and we work as a sort of good cop and a bad cop in terms of promoting implementation of the legislation. So hopefully I've come back to most of the questions. So in terms of NRW, I think doing a lot of great things and does a lot to seek to implement the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act and look beyond just work on environment and nature. The partnership we have with NRW is a very strong one, actually. So as well as scrutinising their delivery, I see it as my job as translating some of the evidence they are gathering into policy recommendations. So we're not just knowing what's happening, but it's difficult for them sometimes to do this. But then I can use that evidence base to say, right, this is telling us this. And these are what we see as the solutions to these problems. And this is our expectation, my expectation of government and others in order to improve on those things. So a key partner in delivering on the legislation. So please wrap up, it says there. So I will stop. So Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much for your time.
Both of you.